Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're glad that you're here with us. Katie Helton, who is our professional development coordinator person, has linked some resources in your chat function, so you can follow along with those as well. We're really excited to have Sasha along with us today for our third part of our three-part series on behavior management. And in particular, today we're going to be talking about can't do versus won't do. We're really excited about that opportunity. And Sasha is with the Autism Helper. Many of you have met her over the years. She has done several trainings for us. And again, this is the third in a series. So many of you have already met her throughout this fall semester as we have welcomed her multiple times to meet with us. Just a reminder that if you have not joined us previously for our first two parts of this series, we do have those available on our website at kexac.org. You can check those out under our professional development tab and get a link to those so you can watch those first two if you haven't been able to participate in those so far. The other note before we get started is that we do have an evaluation that will be linked in the chat function toward the end of the event. And we will be happy to provide you with ELA credit for those who need that once you complete that link at the end. We appreciate all of you guys being here. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Miss Sasha Long.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be back here. I have to say, I love this setup of having a series of trainings, and having the short and sweet ones is kind of nice too, because we all know that Zoom fatigue is real, right? To sit on Zoom for many hours. So we've had these nice short trainings to really learn new strategies that you can bring back to your classrooms right away. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me, whether you're joining me live or watching the recordings. I am Sasha Long. I'm a former special education teacher and board certified behavior analyst and the founder and president of the Autism Helper. At the Autism Helper, we share resources, strategies, and curriculum for those working with kids on the spectrum. We have a podcast, a blog. I do a lot of trainings like I'm doing right now. We have 3 online courses, one on behavior, which we've touched on a lot of that content already in our series, one on executive functions, which we're going to introduce some of those strategies today, and then one on literacy. This is one of my favorite sessions because this combines 2 of my favorite topics, executive functions and positive reinforcement. And I know we all have done a session on positive reinforcement already, so we've already gone pretty in depth on that. So I'm excited to share this kind of framework for how you can approach challenging behaviors. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And thank you, Katie, for sharing those links. The link that Katie shared is a link to my slides as well as some digital downloads, because, you know, if you come to a training, you need a goodie bag. So there's a lot of the tools that I'll be sharing today are in that Google Drive folder. So make sure to grab that and save some of those things. So today we're talking can't do versus won't do. And this really combines, as I said, the strategies we talked earlier this fall about positive reinforcement with executive function skill building. If you've come to my other sessions this semester, you've probably already heard me say this, but I want you to go through today's content with 2 lenses. And I want you to really get in the habit of doing this. Anytime you go to a training, you read a professional book, you're researching, anytime you're taking in professional content, I want you to use 2 lenses. First, you know, the lens we always use. How am I bringing this to my students, my caseload, right? But the second lens is equally as important. How are you bringing these strategies to your team? I want you to think for a minute about the adults that you work with. We all work with adults. And by mid-December, I would venture to say the adults are maybe quite possibly the more challenging part of our jobs, right? We get like sick of the other adults around us by mid-December, but collaborating with adults can be challenging, whether it's paraprofessionals, grade level teachers, IEP team, administrators. It's hard to work with other adults. And it's not just about you drinking the Kool-Aid on all these strategies. It's about you getting every other adult in that student's life to drink the Kool-Aid as well. So put that second lens on throughout today's session and think about, hey, how can I bring this to my grade level team? How can I explain this to the gym teacher? How can I explain this in the teacher's lounge when someone's venting about problem behavior? Because this framework and this mindset, nothing's a quick win, but this one really shifts your perspective quickly. This idea of can't do versus won't do. So our goal, whatever role you are in, special ed, gen ed, early childhood, high school, whatever grades you teach, your goal is roughly the same. Your goal is that your students are learning, right? Your students are making academic progress. They are meeting IEP goals. Your goal is that your students are independent. Obviously, what independence looks like for our 4-year-olds is very different than our 14-year-olds. We are always have different expectations for our kids to rise to a level of independence. And then our students are engaged. Our students are actively participating in learning. They are able to start tasks. They are able to stay on task. So if we have that, if our students are learning independent and engaged, we're happy, right? We're not even on a workshop talking about behavior. But that doesn't always happen so easy because there are some major roadblocks to students learning, being engaged, and being independent. First off, variety of skill levels. If you teach in a self-contained or life skills classroom, or really a resource room, you are teaching a very wide skill set, very wide. I mean, that's like putting it lightly, especially for some of our self-contained and life skills classrooms. You may teach 1st through 4th grade, but when you go to make photocopies, you are photocopying preschool level through 5th grade level content. That is like high level differentiation. If you feel the weight of that, the stress of that like, oh my God, I have to bounce between teaching pronouns to color ID, to letters, to context clues. I mean, just the sheer amount of stuff that you need is overwhelming, right? So that alone is hard. Second, disruptive behaviors. We're not getting to any of those letters, context clues, color identification if there are extreme behaviors happening in your classroom. If there's aggression, eloping, property destruction, major disruptions, we're not getting to the lessons that we've planned. So that obviously is a major roadblock. And then we have large class sizes and we're understaffed. This is funny that I used to say classrooms were historically overstaffed like 5 years ago. Now it's like at a whole new level. I was doing a conference the other week and I was joking. I was like, yeah, if your paraprofessionals are, people that used to work at Target 3 months ago, because your principal walked through Target and was like, does anyone need a job? I'm trying to hire. You're going to have to do a lot of training. Our classrooms all across the country are ridiculously understaffed right now. So really looking at, these are the needs of my kids and these are the staff I should have, but this is the staff I have every day. And that can really be a roadblock in getting to our goal of kids making progress, kids being independent, and kids being engaged. Now, I want you to take a second and think about the expectations for your learners. All of your students face different expectations every day, and they face different types of expectations. There's academic expectations. There are social expectations. There are independent expectations. We talked about that earlier. There's behavioral expectations. You have expectations on how you want your students to ask for help, ask for a break, get attention. These are all different expectations that they are facing in your setting. Now, what happens when your students are not meeting classroom expectations? What happens then? Well, when kids are not meeting classroom expectations, this can manifest in a lot of different ways. This could be shouting out, yelling, blurting out. This could be shutting down. It could be aggression. It could be learned helplessness and waiting for help at every turn. It could be academic regression. It could be difficulty with new skills. It could be struggling to maintain friendships or not completing independent tasks. Those are all different ways that our students are showing us that they are struggling to meet those classroom expectations. Now, think for a second about what that looks like in your classroom. What are the expectations? And then how are your students struggling to meet those expectations in your room, right? What is that disconnect there? Because it's important to identify both things. We know what the problem behavior looks like, right? We know what problem behaviors are, but we also need to know how those problem behaviors relate to the current classroom expectations, right? As Ronnie says, yeah, we're seeing all of these and escalating to much higher levels than we've ever seen. A lot of schools, I'm hearing this consistently, again, from schools around the country, that their kids are struggling behaviorally more than ever. And to me, it's really almost not a surprise when you combine everything that we're facing right now, staff shortages, teachers, paras, everyone, when we're combining what the last 2 and 3 years looked like for our learners. When we talk about executive function skill building and we look at how these skills develop, these are skills that are taught through our learning experiences. Well, many kids missed out on essential learning experiences when they were home for the last 2 years. So they missed out on the opportunity to build those skills. So we want to really hone in on what's happening and then the why. Because if we don't have the why, we may pick an incorrect strategy. That's not what we want, right? So we want to first, what we're really going to do today is we're going to introduce this can't do versus won't do framework. And I want you to share this. I want you to share this idea in the teacher's lounge, in the hallway, when you're making photocopies, because once you start to think about challenging behaviors in this way, it can very easily point you in the right direction of what type of strategy to use. I'm not saying that implementing the strategy is going to be easy, but it's going to get your mindset in the right place. So our agenda for today, I have an ambitious agenda with our 50 minutes that we have left, but don't worry, I talk quickly, as you can tell already. So I'm going to introduce our can't do versus won't do framework, and then we're going to go through kind of the two umbrellas that our strategies could go. If it's a can't do situation, we're going to look at building executive functions. And if you're like, I have no idea what executive functions are, Sasha, I've heard people talk about them. They're supposed to be important. What are they? Don't worry. We're going to introduce those, and then we're going to review some of our reinforcement content. So as I've maybe said already in some of our behavior sessions, it's important to remember that when we are creating change for our students, it starts with us. You really have to change your behavior. The only behavior you have complete control of is your own. And that's worth repeating again and again, because this is where your mindset needs to start. This is where your actions need to start. This is the mindset that we need all of our teams and our adults that are working with our kids at. So we're really at a giant self-help group this morning, because it starts with us. How we respond, how we react, how we set expectations is how we can in turn cause positive behavior change. Now, I have no magic wands. This is not a quick fix. If it was easy to change, this wouldn't be a problem. And we're kind of sometimes eager for those quick fixes, but it's a process, and that's okay. I love this quote, and I probably shared this already with you all, but this again is the mindset that we need to have. If a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. But if a child doesn't know how to behave, we punish. We need to approach behavior change, building positive, pro-social, communicative behaviors with the same rigor and with the same thoroughness that we approach teaching academics. Because to me, it's arguably more important. We need those foundations first before we can even get to the academics. So big picture, it's all about focusing on controlling yourself, not your students. It starts with you. It starts with how you set up the environment. It starts with what interventions you use, what strategies you use. It comes back to you. And some of these grounding principles that we'll kind of intertwine in the rest of our workshop today are some of these. We want to model the behaviors you want to see more of. If you want your students to communicate with calmness and respect, you need to communicate with calmness and respect. I am hit in the face with this literally every day in my own parenting. Man, I had a frustrating morning with my little ones, and I had low patience, and guess what? They had low patience right back with me, right? Kids model what they see, right? If you are snapping, if you are losing your temper, if you are, talking even just rudely, even to other people around you, your kids are mimicking that. We want to be consistent with our expectations. When we think about the group that we teach, we always want to be coming from a perspective of using trauma-informed practices in our behavior management, because we don't always know all of our students' learning history. We don't know what happened 5 years ago. We don't know what happened last weekend. So when in doubt, always default to those strategies. And this is one right here, being consistent with our expectations. There aren't surprises. Our kids don't have to infer what kind of mood we're in to understand what the expectations are. They know. And we want to make sure it's really a problem. Are the behaviors that we are targeting for decrease truly a problem for that child? Are they interfering with learning? Are they causing injury? If yes, then that's something we're going to target. But I want you to consider some of what I call my gray area behaviors. Maybe there are sensory seeking behaviors, or coping strategies, behaviors that help reduce anxiety, but they look a little different. Johnny likes to pace while listening to the lecture. Okay. Cool, let him pace, right? Is that a problem for him, or is that a problem for you? So make sure that the behaviors that you're targeting for decrease aren't those gray area behaviors. And last, this is my favorite one. This is the one I want you to write on a Post-it, put it on your desk, put it in the bulletin board to remind yourself of. Be very clear on the difference between responding and reacting. And this is one to share with the teams. There's a big difference between the two. A reaction is filled with emotion. It's from the gut. You don't think about child's learning history, functions of behavior, the whole person, the context, anything. You just react, right? A kid's running in the hall and you're like, I am a teacher. No one will run in front of me. No running, right? You don't think about anything else. You just react. A response is different. A response is purposeful. A response is thought out. A response, think about the entire context. we're human. We're always going to react sometimes, right? Your goal should be every single day that you respond more than react. That's it, right? If you can do that and walk yourself to the parking lot at the end of the day and you're like, I responded more than I reacted, you pat yourself on the back. That's the goal. The next level of this, like expertise level of this, especially if you have paras that work in your classroom, make this the culture of your team to be able to call each other out. When you see a team member reacting a little more than responding, tell them, hey, you need a break? You okay? A little frustrated? And let them tell you that, right? I want people to call me out. I'd rather have someone take a 5-minute break than react and then maybe overreact, which will in turn cause escalations in behavior. So let's start with our can't do versus won't do framework on how we're going to piece together these two types of approaches. So when we are viewing a challenging behavior and we see that our student is not meeting classroom expectations, is that because he can't, or is that because he won't? A can't do situation is when the work or demand is too challenging and we need new skills. The won't do situation is when a student is not motivated and we need to adjust the reinforcer. So in either situation, we want to really hone in on what we have to adjust. With can't do's, we need to teach new skills or adjust the demand. And won't do's, we need to adjust the reinforcer. Every decision that you and I make is shaped by two things. It's shaped by our skills and ability to perform that action and our motivation to act or not act on the actions. We need both. We need the skills and we need the motivation. If one or both are missing, we're probably not going to engage in that behavior to meet the expectation. Now, here's an example from my life. Now, I am not a runner, okay? I don't really like running. If you see me running, something's probably chasing me because I'm not going to be running for fun. If you do run for fun, that's great. I love that for you. I wish I was a runner. I don't like it. So if someone asks me to run a mile, I can do this, right? I'm physically capable, but I don't want to. I'd rather watch TV. So I'm like, no, I don't want to run a mile. Now, if someone asks me to run a mile and they'll give me $500. Suddenly I'm like, oh, okay. I can do this activity. Physically, I can run a mile. I won't enjoy it, but I can. And now I have the motivation. Now I want to. So I've got the skills and I've got the motivation. Great. I'm going to be out there running. I'm not going to like it, but I'll do it, right? Now, let's say someone asks me to run a mile in 7 minutes. Now, I cannot do this activity. I'm not in very good shape. I haven't run in forever. It'll probably be a struggle, right? I can't do that activity. I don't have the skills. Now, let's say someone's like, well, run a mile in 7 minutes. I'll give you $500. I'll give you $5,000. It doesn't matter how much motivation or reinforcement you threw at me. I don't have those skills yet. So I'm not going to be able to do that. And I know that so deeply in my core, I probably won't even bother trying. I know that. For some of our kids, the expectations they are facing in their classrooms are equivalent to asking me to run a 7-minute mile. They can't do it. They don't have the flexibility, the attention span, the organization, the time management skills yet to meet those expectations. And they know it so much that they might not try, just like me. I know I can't do that. And sometimes we just throw reinforcement at the issue. Well, what about this? Here's a token chart. Here's a behavior contract. Here's this. And they're like, I just can't do it. So it's missing skills, or we need to adjust that expectation. I want you to think for a minute about your can't do's and won't do's. And in the chat, I want you to share your won't do's. These are easier to think of. Even in the last 24 hours, what is something that you had the skills to do? You're capable of doing it, but you didn't do it. You didn't have the motivation. I'm going to tell you mine. I had the skills this morning to wake up with my alarm and not press snooze. I physically was capable of that, but did I do that? No, I pressed snooze like 3 times, guys. It was bad. It was bad. I hate those mornings. I pressed snooze 3 times. I didn't have the motivation to wake up. Yeah, Katie, cleaning your house. You have the skills. I don't have the motivation. Another one I did, maybe you guys do this, you're a fan of this, where you do all your laundry. I have the motivation to get the laundry done for some reason. It's the folding it and putting it away. So I take it from my dryer and I put it on top of the dryer, and then I just pull out of that pile for like a week until I need to do laundry again. And sometimes even rewash a few of those things that are on top of the dryer because I don't have the motivation to put it away. I have the skills, not the motivation. a lot of like household chores or like some like, yeah, eating healthy foods. I could have ordered the salad. I had the skills, but my motivation was to order the cheeseburger, right? Now think for a second about the reverse. Think about your can't do's. What is something you have the motivation to do, but you don't have the skills right now? Maybe you're working on the skills. Maybe you could learn the skills, but you don't have it yet. So mine, and I've used the same example on and off for like 2 years because it happens so frequently in my house because it never gets fully fixed. The TV in the main floor of my house has been broken on and off for like 2 years. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. And the problem with it, when it's broken, only Netflix works, which is like fine, right? It's livable, total first world problem here. But like after a while, I get annoyed. I want to watch something other than Netflix, right? I don't know how to fix it. My tech expertise is unplugging and replugging, and that's about it. So I have the motivation. I'd like to fix it, but I don't have the knowledge. I could sit on YouTube, learn how to do it, call someone and have them explain to me, but I haven't done that yet, right? I need the skills. So I haven't engaged in that behavior. So think about sometimes, household tasks, tech things, speaking another language. Maybe you have the motivation. I'd like to speak another language, but I just don't have the skills yet. Maybe I'm learning. So think about your can't do's and won't do's. Start to, as you go through the next few days, identify situations that are can't do versus won't do, and think about that. So how do we identify with our students what is a can't do situation and what is a won't do situation? So first, focus observation. Observation is key when it's purposeful. I'm going to share a really nice observation data sheet. I don't like an observation that's just like taking notes because to me, that's always hard to pull information from. Instead, I'd prefer something that's a little bit more focused that will help us see how expectations match to behavior. I'll show that data sheet in a second. Another way we can identify can't do versus won't do is test and collect data. Hey, when you offer a high ticket reinforcer, what happens? When you change the expectations, what happens? And see in what situations is that student successful? Is that student successful when I give them more help, more time, more support? Might be a skill issue. Is that student more successful when I change the motivation and the reinforcement option? Might be a won't do situation. And really analyze that current skill set. What are they successful at doing? And what are they struggling with? So if it is a can't do situation, then there's two big options. We can scale back. We can change our expectations and our demand. When I couldn't run the 7-minute mile, if someone had changed the expectation, said, actually, I need you to do a 9-minute mile, or I want you to do a 7-minute mile, but you can use rollerblades. They changed the expectation, then I could be successful. Another big area that we can focus on with can't do's and won't do's, and that's what we're going to focus on today, is building our executive functions. Very often, our missing skills are missing executive functioning skills. And that's what I want you to think about today is when we think skills, it's not just academics like, oh, his ability to add or read sight words. Skills are executive functions as well. And oftentimes, that's what our kids are missing that are prohibiting these behaviors from happening. And then for won't do's, the two big approaches we could take are one, adding in reinforcement. Maybe there's no reinforcement set up currently, or mostly adjusting that reinforcer, that we might not be using a reinforcer in the right way, or could be using something that's not a reinforcer. So first, let's talk about our can't do situations and how we can build executive functioning skills. So what are executive functions? Maybe earlier when I was like, you're like, hey, what are these things? I've heard them talked about. You're like, yep, that's me. I know these are important, but I'm not quite sure what they are. Executive functioning skills are the cognitive processes required for goal-directed behavior. My favorite definition is this: the skills to perform or execute a task. I like that definition. Executive, execute. We have to execute a task. This involves really everything you do every day to manage your behavior. And because you use these skills so consistently throughout the day, they tend to work together, and a weakness in one area or one skill affects the overall ability to perform that task. So these skills are hugely important because of that, because they are embedded into so many key areas of our lives. This impacts our ability to make and maintain friendships, to follow classroom and school rules. This affects big time academics. Oh my gosh, I could do literally a whole day training on executive functions and even just reading comprehension, not even literacy, reading comprehension. Oh my gosh. For your kids that are struggling readers, look at executive functions because they're so intertwined into our academics, into our assessments, our ability to complete informal and standardized assessments. To complete an assessment, you need working memory, you need task initiation, you need sustained attention, you need metacognition. These are all hugely important skills when taking an assessment. When our learners have proficient executive functioning skills, they become more flexible, more independent. They're better problem solvers. They're better able to self-regulate and self-advocate. I think we'd all be on board for all of those things. So here are our 11 types of executive functions. Now, these roughly go in order from, I would say, more straightforward and concrete to more complex. And I mean straightforward and concrete, meaning that it's kind of like one skill on its own versus as we go down this list, something like time management includes working memory, task initiation, sustained attention. We see these skills start to really build. And these are also, I would say, the order that they roughly develop naturally in early childhood. So we have higher levels of the first half of skills in early childhood. We get some of the other ones later down the road. So response inhibition, working memory, emotional control, sustained attention, task initiation, planning, organization, time management, persistence, flexibility, and metacognition. So here are 11 types of executive functioning skills. These are a part of our everyday life. We use these skills all day, every day. So let's look at an everyday activity and see how we use all 11 executive functioning skills in an everyday activity. So let's go grocery shopping. Now, I'm just sounding so negative this morning, but grocery shopping is not like a household errand that I love to do. I would rather, there's a lot of other things I'd rather do. Grocery shopping, again, I said, I'm like, I don't like running. I don't like grocery shopping. You're like, what does Sasha like doing? But some people, it's like their me time, like they enjoy it. Like I'll do it. I'm not mad about it, but it's not my relaxing activity. But you got to do it, right? You need food. So we have to go grocery shopping. The first step is we have to plan which store we're going to go to. Think of our options. Are we going to go to Myers? Are we going to go to Walmart? Are we going to go to Trader Joe's? What store are we going to? Then we need to use metacognition to figure out what we have to buy. Maybe you look at your meal plan to see what things you're going to cook that week. You look in your pantry and your fridge to see what's missing. Are we out of milk? Do we need more eggs? Maybe look at what's on sale that week. So that all involves metacognition. Then we need to figure out a time to go using your time management skills. If you start work at 7:30, you can't go grocery shopping at 7:15. You have to go when you have enough time to shop and return home. Then you have to leave for the store. Task initiation. As we go through these skills, I want you to think about which skills are troublesome for you, because we all have different areas of strengths and weaknesses, skills that come more easily than other ones. For me, task initiation is always my struggle. Like I'm good once I get going. Task initiation doesn't always come as easily to me. So you go, you initiate your task, you go grocery shopping, you're at the store, you're about to pull into a superstar parking spot in the crowded parking lot. And guess what? Someone steals your parking spot. They swoop right in front of you. And you're mad, right? But you use emotional control to shake it off. You're going to see that person in the store in a minute. If you roll down your window and swear at them, it's going to be awkward. It's not worth raising your blood pressure. You find another parking spot. While you're shopping, you use working memory to identify the food you need and where that food is. This is your short-term memory. Remember, was I out of bread? Oh no, I was out of bread. Let me go to the bakery. Let me find it. You use response inhibition to avoid indulging in things you don't need. Yes, chips are on sale, 10 for $10, but do you need 10 bags of chips? Probably not. Your response inhibition is lower when you're hungrier. That's why they say don't go grocery shopping hungry. You adapt your list if things are missing using flexibility. So if they don't have the same type of, the brands of bread you normally get, you get something different. And you stay focused to get home on time using sustained attention. And then last, you put all the groceries away when you get home. That's persistence. It's also organization. You have to organize things in the right way. Persistence to me is the last 3%. If you go grocery shopping and you leave all of the food on your kitchen table when you get home, and then you just go to bed, have you accomplished the task of grocery shopping fully? I would argue no, you haven't, because the goal of grocery shopping is to have food you need during the week, right? If you leave it on the kitchen table and don't put it away, the milk is gross, the lunch meat's questionable, the ice cream that you bought has melted, you've not accomplished the goal of having food available during the week because you didn't do the last step. You didn't put it away in the spot that's going to keep it safe and healthy for you to eat. A lot of our students struggle with persistence, that last 3%. Your students maybe are struggling, not turning in assignments, not doing their homework, and parents are like, I see them doing it at home. They're like, well, they're not turning it into me. Maybe during virtual instruction, they just didn't press submit, where then we're not having that persistence piece there. So with all of these hugely important skills, how can we build these up for our learners? So this morning, I'm going to share 4 of what I call my global strategies. When I do a full day on executive functions, I also go into each executive function with some additional strategies. But the global strategies, to me, are what affect all 11 of these skills and how we can build up all of these skills. So it can really work for any executive function. Our global strategies are consistency and routines, clear verbal cues, modeling, and visuals. So first up, consistency and routines. This is huge. It is all about the ability to sequence and anticipate what is coming next. Predictable sequences are helpful. Predictable sequences lead to less negative behaviors, less anxiety, more independence, more efficiency. Kids can start things on their own more readily. Kids can be more independent. They can get more done in less time. I think we're all on board with all of that. Less negative behaviors, more independence. Sounds great. Now, here's my silly example for why consistency and routines is important. Stay with me. I haven't lost it. Let's say we're all abducted by aliens. Okay. We're all abducted by aliens, and you have 2 options. You get to pick how the situation is. Okay. Here's the first option. The first option is blue and red tables. You go in the room with blue tables, and every day it's the same thing. Every day at the blue table room, you get Netflix, you get ice cream, you get to drink wine. It's great in blue table room. After blue table room, every day it's the same in red table room. It's always the same. It's not as great as blue table room. In red table room, the only snack is celery. You have to do pages and pages of long division, and your only music option is Kid Rock. Now, even if you're a diehard Kid Rock fan, it's going to get old, right? So every day it's the same in this scenario. Blue table room, Netflix, red table room, Kid Rock. Before you even enter that room, as you see those tables, you know what's coming. So that's one option. Your other option is green and yellow. Every day is different in green table room. Sometimes it's Netflix, sometimes it's Kid Rock. Every day it's different in yellow table room. Sometimes it's celery, sometimes it's ice cream. Now, in this stressful, high anxiety situation of being abducted by aliens, which situation do you prefer? In the chat, do you prefer number 1, same every day, or number 2, unpredictable? I am team 1 all day, you guys. And sometimes people argue with me. I'm like, well, I like some unpredictability. Not in a stressful situation, you don't. We want to know what's coming. If we know what's going to happen, and we don't have to rely on the aliens that we don't understand, our stress goes down. Our negative behaviors go down because we know what's coming. As we walk in a blue table room, we're like, what are we going to watch on Netflix, right? Versus in green and yellow, you're like, ooh, am I going to be surprised by Kid Rock? Ooh, no one wants to be surprised by Kid Rock, even if you like it, right? Celery, I don't know when that's coming. So we want to think about that your classrooms may be similar to being abducted by aliens. It's unfamiliar, it's loud, it's overwhelming, it's scary. You are an early childhood teacher. If you teach preschool, oh my God, your classroom is an alien planet. And when mom comes in with that 3-year-old on her hip and her one arm is like real jacked because he's 53 pounds and she's been carrying him around for 2 years and plops him in your class and he looks around, your classroom is a foreign planet. It really is. So that consistency and that routine allows our kids to be independent, to do things on their own, to not rely on verbal language, which is often a challenge, to not rely on social cues, which are often a challenge. So use your schedules, whether that's with pictures or with text, to show and communicate those consistent routines. Next, we have clear verbal cues. There's an important way that we should consider how we are giving verbal directions to our students. First, be consistent. Be consistent with the language that we use, with the words we use for things. Avoid giving directions in the form of a question. Hey, Johnny, do you want to take your math test? What's Johnny going to say? No, I don't, right? And then we're like, no, too bad, come take it. And in doing so, we have taught our students that saying no doesn't matter, that their no isn't valued or respected. It's not a message we're meaning to send, but it's a message we are sending. Instead, we want to teach our kids that their no works, right? No is an important word to use. So if it's a direction, just say it as a direction. Hey, Johnny, come here and take your math test. Don't give directions when there are competing distractions. If your class is on their cell phones and all talking, they're not listening to you. If Johnny's still on his iPad, don't tell him what he's doing after the iPad because he's not listening. Wait till you have their attention first. Be specific. Say what you mean. Repetition without nagging is key. We want to give that consistent, clear direction. The big picture here on making sure you're doing this right is really just saying what you mean. And that means using directions that are in the positive, not in the negative. When we tell someone what not to do, we are requiring them to make an inference of what they should do instead. So when you say don't run, your student has to infer that they should walk. Our SLPs will remind us that inferential skill is a tricky one. So ensure that your directions are concrete. So that was those were our first two global strategies: consistent routines, clear verbal cues. Our next global strategy is modeling. Modeling is such a powerful strategy. Modeling is a visual cue that requires no laminating, no Velcro, takes an extra 30 seconds to do it, showing your student what to do. Don't just say it. Think about all your learners that are not strong auditory learners. Think about your students with low receptive language. Modeling is an easy strategy to embed in a lot of types of settings, at the playground, at gym class, in the cafeteria. Think about this scenario. You ask your student to pick up their piece of paper, throw it in the garbage, push in your chair, and line up for lunch. 4-step direction. Totally normal in a classroom. We're like, oh, that sounds like a lot. Yeah, it is. But count how many step directions you give today. Count how many step directions you give. Because very often we're like, oh no, I just used 2 or 3 steps. Then you're like, oh, I gave a 7-step direction, right? So pick up your piece of paper, throw it in the garbage, push in your chair, and line up for lunch. Okay, Johnny? Well, you look over later and Johnny's standing there with his piece of paper. He hasn't pushed in his chair. He hasn't lined up for lunch. He's just standing there holding his paper. And you're frustrated. We're like, Johnny, what are you doing? It's December. We always say that like we think labeling the month means anything to the child, right? Well, Johnny was so focused on processing step 1 that he completely missed step 2, 3, and 4. So when you were like, Johnny, pick up your piece of paper, he was like, pick up my piece of paper, pick up my piece of paper, pick up my piece of paper. I did it, picked up my piece of paper. And then he missed steps 2, 3, and 4. His processing speed was not there yet. You went too quickly. He was focused on processing step 1, that he missed steps 2 through 4. So slow down. If instead, let me pop back once again. If instead the teacher had modeled, hey, Johnny, pick up your piece of paper, throw it in the garbage, and she physically threw her paper in the garbage, push in your chair and line up for lunch, that would have been a visual cue for him. And he wouldn't have needed to only rely on that language processing. Visuals also help with this struggle with receptive language. Visuals help our kids understand our world. They're not a decoration. They have an important purpose. Think about all the things you say on a daily basis and make sure you have important visuals to match. So when we use these global strategies, when we use consistent routines, when we use modeling, when we use clear verbal cues, when we use visuals, all of these things help support our learners struggling with executive functions. They help our learners take ownership in the classroom. They allow them to be more independent, needing less help, allowing them to initiate tasks more on their own and transition and problem solve more readily. So all of those strategies, when implemented consistently, can really help build up these missing skills and solve those can't do situations. All right, so that was our second step on our agenda. So we introduced can't do versus won't do. We talked about what to do for can't do. Now let's wrap up with what to do in our won't do situations. So when these skills are there, but the motivation or reinforcement is not. So we already did a session on reinforcement. So if you missed that, you could watch the recording. We did do a session on reinforcement, but I'm going to review some of these important concepts and build on them a little bit. So it's easy to focus more on the negative behaviors, right? Those behaviors are urgent often, they're disruptive, we have to intervene right away, but we want to make sure that we're also paying attention to the positive ones as well. The basic concept with reinforcement is that if a behavior is followed by something awesome, you will want to do it more and more and more and more. The something awesome is reinforcement. Reinforcement, the technical definition, is something that comes after a behavior that increases the chances of that behavior happening again in the future. Keyword here is after. Has to come after the behavior. Key component here is increases the chances. When Johnny walks into the classroom, puts his materials away, turns in his homework, sits down quietly at his desk, and starts his bell ringer 100% independently, quickly, quietly, all on his own. It's perfection. You're like, oh my God. When you're like, Johnny, that was amazing. You're doing so great. Thank you so much for being on task. Oh my gosh. That whole sequence of him entering the class quietly and correctly is done. It happened. How we deliver reinforcement will impact if the likelihood of that happening tomorrow, next week, next month. Reinforcement is all about building up the good that's there. We can't change what already happened, but our actions can impact the probability of that happening again. So we want to ensure that behaviors that we want to see more of are consistently followed with reinforcement. So I shared this example already, but it's just such a good one. So I always think about trick-or-treating when I think about reinforcement, because this is such a nice way to see a behavior built up really quickly with reinforcement. So about now, gosh, probably 10 or 15 years ago, I went over to my friend's house who had little twins, and we were going to take them trick-or-treating. And if you have little kids or neighbors or nieces or nephews or grandkids, you know there's a particular Halloween for every child where trick-or-treating really clicks. Because the first few years, they don't get it, right? When a baby's like 1, you take them trick-or-treating for like the Instagram pic, but you know, they don't get it, right? They don't know what's going on. But there's a year where trick-or-treating always clicks, usually around like 3 years old. So I go to my friend's house, take her twins trick-or-treating. When I get there, they don't want to go. They don't want to go trick-or-treating. They're not into it, which I totally respect. Trick-or-treating is super weird. We tell our kids all year, don't talk to strangers, don't take candy from people you don't know, don't go to someone's house you don't know. And then on Halloween, we're like, yes, go to this house where someone's dressed like a murderer and take their candy. Makes no sense. The kids didn't want to go. They also kept being like, why can't we eat the candy mom bought? And we're like, that's for other kids. And they're just like, what? So confused. But we're like, come on, come on. So we drag them outside. We go to the first house. We go up the steps. We knock on the door. Candy bag open. Trick or treat. Candy goes in. And they both whip and look at us. And we're like, yeah, you can keep it. Go to the next house. Knock up the stairs. Knock on the door. Trick or treat. Candy. Again. We're like, yeah, you can keep that one too. We're like, all right. Third house, a little faster. Knock on the door. Trick or treat, candy. They kind of side eye. We're like, yep, you keep that one too. By house number 4, they are sprinting. And then we were trick or treating for 2 hours because the behavior of knocking on the door, saying trick or treat was immediately followed by something awesome, candy. So it increased the chances of them wanting to do it at house 2, house 3, house 5, house 500. That behavior was built up right there. Behaviors are learned. They don't just happen. They serve a purpose. Sometimes it's really easy to see that sequence, like in the trick-or-treating example or in class, you know, someone's bored, they pull someone's hair, they get a reaction. If you don't want to talk to someone, you press silent, you avoid the phone call. We see that sequence. Sometimes we can't see the clear sequence. It may not make sense to us, but it makes sense to that child or that individual. Let's say you went to the mall, and at the mall, you sat on the red bench. And while you're sitting on the red bench, you found a crisp $100 bill under the red bench. You looked around. You didn't see anyone. It wasn't in a wallet. You didn't have to play Good Samaritan. You just got to keep the $100 bill. You had to go shopping. No one needs to know where your money came from, right? Great day at the mall. The next week, you go back and you sit on the blue bench. And while you're sitting on the blue bench, a bird poops on your head. In the chat, where are you sitting forever when you go to the mall? The red bench or the blue bench? And it's only going to make sense to us who've been through this. We're sitting on the red bench, right? If you go shopping with your friend and they sit on the blue bench, you're going to be like, "Ooh, good luck over there. I'm not sitting there." Why? Is there an ATM under the red bench that's like spitting out hundreds? Do the birds only fly over the blue bench? No, but our behavior has been changed by that situation. Our learning history has changed. So there's two big ways where reinforcement can go wrong. Because it might seem simple, like, okay, just add reinforcement to everything, it's fine, it's fine. But if we mess up these two seemingly simple components of reinforcement, it takes something that was a reinforcer and actually makes it not a reinforcer anymore. So we have to think about what reinforcer is given and when the reinforcer is given. Now, reinforcement takes many forms. Reinforcement could be friends laughing. It could be Netflix. It could be being alone. It could be coffee. It could be peer approval. It could be getting sent to the hallway. It could be good grades. It could be stickers, right? Those are all different types of reinforcement. For some of us, reinforcement is individual to each person. What's a reinforcer to you is not a reinforcer to me. Not every kid likes iPad or Cheetos, or the kind of gross combination of Cheetos and iPad where the orange dust is stuck in that button forever and ever. Not every kid cares about peer approval, good grades, teacher attention, praise, right? That is not a reinforcer for every child. There's also an important difference between preferred items and reinforcers, things we like versus things that will work for. Here are my preferred items. These are things that I like. I like fall scented candles year round, you guys. I don't discriminate. I want my house to smell like the inside of a pumpkin at all times. I don't care. Drives everyone here nuts. It's just my life. Let me have my fall scented candles. This example is getting a little dated now, but I really, really liked the show Scandal, right? Wasn't that a great show? I just wish I was like Olivia Pope at any moment, wearing my beautiful suit, solving world problems. And then I love Starbucks. I probably, after this call, might get Starbucks in my lunch today. I like it. I could make it myself, but I'd prefer to have someone else make my coffee. Now, as I said, these are things I like. They're not always things I'm willing to work for. If a school district called me and said, "Hey, Sasha, will you fly in a plane 5 hours, come here, give an 8-hour presentation and fly home, and after we'll let you watch Scandal," I'm going to be like, "Oh, no, thank you. I'll take a paycheck. Scandal doesn't pay my bills," right? That's not going to be a reinforcer for a big, hard behavior. For some of our kids, praise, good grades, peer approval is basically a fall scented candle for them. They like it, they'll take it, but I'm not going to do something new and hard for it. So we need to spend time identifying reinforcers. This can be tricky. Not all of our kids have strong verbal skills to tell us. Some of our kids may struggle making choices. Some students just may not be able to identify their own reinforcers readily, and reinforcers change right before lunch, especially maybe you have an early lunch break. If you're an early childhood teacher, you have your lunch at like 11 o'clock or 10:30. I had a teacher I used to work with that called it her brunch break, which I thought was hilarious. If you have an early lunch break, normally right before lunch, you get starving. If right before lunch, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to bring you a huge plate of cheese fries," you'd be like, "Yes, please. Thank you so much." But if you were at a restaurant and you just ate a huge meal and the waiter brought you over a plate of cheese fries, you'd be like, "No, I don't want that." Cheesecake, yes, right? I call this the Taylor Swift effect. We get sick of things. If you have something available too often, you get sick of it, right? The new Taylor Swift song's out. What's the new one? Antihero. You love it. You listen to it all the time. It's on the radio. It's on your Spotify. It's on your playlist. But after a while, you're like, if I hear that song again, I'm going to lose my dang mind. We get sick of it, right? Your kids get sick of the same options, the same potential reinforcers that are available in your classroom. Also, for some of our kids on the spectrum, especially, they may have untraditional reinforcers. Oh, I know. Oh, I'm a Swiftie. Don't worry. I tried and failed miserably to get Taylor Swift tickets. I tried. I'm not sick of Antihero yet, for the record, but I will be. We all will be. Untraditional reinforcers. Think about unique interests of your learners. Things that maybe are not on your choice boards, in your treasure chest, in your topics of conversation. What's something that your child is uniquely interested in? And hone in on that. If they're uniquely interested in that, that is likely a high-powered reinforcer. Just because it's not something that you have available or as part of your repertoire, something that's maybe a little different or quote unquote weird, who cares? The fact that I like fall scented candles all year is a little bit weird, and that's okay, right? We all have different things that we're interested in that we like. So here's some untraditional reinforcers that I've had with former clients or former students. I had a former client that loved spelling only community locations with magnet letters. Great, let's do that. Here are two of my favorites. When I was pregnant with my first child, I had an in-home client that I went to about once a month. And I don't know how this started, but he became very fixated on looking at the app on my phone that said what kind of fruit or vegetable the baby was in relation to the size of the baby, right? Like the baby's the size of a mango, the baby's the size of a pineapple. And the therapist and him would talk about this when Miss Sasha comes, we can look at her phone and we can see what her baby's at. And this was like a big deal. Loved it. Fine. His mom was dying. She's like, I think he thinks there's a watermelon in your belly. That's why it's blowing his mind. And then this is my favorite one, my last one. I had a former student who was obsessed with Maury Povich. You guys know Maury, runs his trashy reality show. Maury, I think, is still on. I think he's like living his best life. He's probably a millionaire. You Are Not the Father, that guy, right? So student who's obsessed with Maury Povich. Now I gotta tell the whole story here because it's real funny. His most high-powered reinforcer, though, was playing Maury Povich with me. And he wanted to be Maury, and he wanted me to be like the contestant on the show or the person on the show. And he wanted to give me the paternity test results, like tell me if I was the father or not. And then I had to give the explosive reaction, because that's the beauty of the Maury show, is there's always an explosive reaction, right? Oh my God, you guys, I did this. I did this all the time. We played Maury. Yes, we played Maury all the time. Did I look ridiculous and feel ridiculous? Absolutely. Did I care? Not even a little bit. I was excellent. I maybe missed my calling as an actress. And guess what, guys? This child made so much progress using such a unique, high-powered reinforcer that we had to rewrite his IEP 6 months into the year because he had by far surpassed all of his goals. Right? Hone in on those untraditional reinforcers. Here are some ways we can identify reinforcers. We can observe, that purposeful observation that we talked about earlier. We can talk to caregivers and parents. Don't ask them, what's your child's reinforcer? Ask them, hey, what's in their room? What does your child do while you make dinner? If you are going on a 5-hour car trip, what's in your car to keep your child entertained? Conduct preference assessments. Do this regularly. Give different options of things. See what they take. Trial and error. Write it down. What causes increases, what doesn't? Ask that $1 million question. Hey, hypothetically, if I were to give you $1 million to prevent this behavior, what would you do? When you answer that question, there's a lot of potential reinforcers that come up in that answer. Now, we've talked already pretty frequently of contrived reinforcers, right? Slinkies, iPad, brakes, Maury Povich. Those are things that we're adding to the environment, right? It's not our job to decide what is and what is not a reinforcer for our kids. We don't want anyone to decide what we like and don't like. Start with what works and think about fading in naturally occurring reinforcers. Things that occur naturally in the real environment in a school are things like praise, work completion, good grades. Those may not be a reinforcer yet, but we can pair those with contrived reinforcers, and eventually those could function as reinforcers on their own. So we said the two missteps that we have here are, what is the reinforcer, which we just talked about, and last, when we give the reinforcer. If we give the reinforcer too late, it may not be as effective. We want that connection to be really clear. This is the exact skill that you did, and this is what I want you to do more often. So we want to provide reinforcement exactly when you're seeing the behaviors you want to see more of. Now, if you're like, Sasha, how could I possibly do that? I have like way too many students in my class. I have no staff. I can't possibly be delivering reinforcement immediately all the time. I don't have octopus arms. That's where you're going to start. Then you're going to fade to the natural schedule of reinforcement, which is delayed reinforcement. Reinforcement doesn't come immediately in the real world. It's delayed. We have to wait, but you have to fade there slowly for your students. Delayed reinforcement, or having to wait for reinforcement, works because of our history of learning. We know that it'll come. Think about your job. Does anyone's principal wait by the parking lot and give them a stack of cash for a hard day's work? No, right? You don't get paid every day. You get paid maybe every other week, twice a month, maybe once a month. So what gets you out of bed Monday morning and gets you to doing your job if you're not getting a paycheck that day? It's knowing in your history of learning that that paycheck is coming. Your history of learning is I go to work, I do my job, I get paid. I go to work, I do my job, I get paid. That's your history of learning, right? Would you go to work if you didn't get paid? What if you missed one paycheck? I would argue that you would still go to work because you have other reinforcers besides just your paycheck. You care about your students, you care about your team, your commitment, right? Your progress of your kids. There's other reinforcers. And your history of learning is so strong that that paycheck will come that you probably assume it was a mistake. You're like, oh, that paycheck will come. It was a mistake. Something happened, tech issue. It'll come. Because your history of learning is very strong. Now, you don't have to answer me, but I know your answer. What if you missed 5 paychecks? Are you still going to work? Probably not, because your history of learning has changed. It used to be I go to work, I do my job, I get paid. Now it's I go to work, I do my job, I don't get paid, right? Have you ever seen ads like this online? Earn up to $5,400 per month. Only 23 people need it. What do you think when you see this ad? I think scam. I think too good to be true. Not likely to click on this. What about this sign? Are you likely to call this phone number to sell your house? I really took this picture too. This wasn't a Google image. Again, you're probably thinking scam, sketchy, shady. Ooh. We have a history of learning with receiving a paycheck from a school. We don't have a history of learning with clicking on ads online and that being successful. We don't have a history of learning with calling a number from a cardboard sign, right? We don't trust those things. For our students, when you move to delayed reinforcement too quickly, they don't buy it. They think it's a scam. They think we're the sketchy ad, the sketchy sign. They're like, no, 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 I don't trust you. So we want to create the history of learning for our students. We have to start small doing that and build over time. When we jump too quickly to like, oh, something awesome's happening Friday or the end of the day or sometime in the future, they don't believe it. I'm not going to do all that work for something that I don't know if it's coming. Things like token economies are helpful to build to delayed reinforcement. Schedules are helpful to build to delayed reinforcement. All of these things you already have in your class are there for a reason. Visuals help to build to delayed reinforcement. All of this is going to work together to build towards that learning history of don't worry, I got you. What you're working for is coming. So let's put this all together. We are going to identify behavioral strategies as a can't do or a won't do situation. Can't do, we need to adjust the expectation or demand and teach executive functions. Won't do, we need to adjust the reinforcer. For can't do situations, we're going to use our global strategies. We're going to use visuals and modeling, clear language, consistent routines to build up executive functions. And for won't do situations, we're going to fine tune reinforcement, make sure we're using something that is a reinforcer, and make sure we're using it at the right time. We're using it immediately and then fading. All right, thank you so much for joining me. I went right to the last minute here. I so appreciate you all joining me for this behavior series. I think this setup of these shorter sessions throughout the semester hopefully has been really helpful for you, so it's not too overwhelming. My contact information is on the last slide. Make sure you grab that link with the other downloadable materials. If you have any questions later in the year, feel free to reach out and contact me. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, but most importantly, I hope everyone has a very, very relaxing winter break right around the corner. You all deserve it. This is an extremely hard job, and I know you all need and deserve that break. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sasha. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate you spending all this time with us over the fall. What a great learning opportunity this has been for all of us. I really even learned a lot being able to take back, not just work in the classrooms, but also work at home. So that's always beneficial for us. We appreciate you. And those of you who are with us today, I know that you have enjoyed this as well. We ask that you share this information with your colleagues. We do have these posted on our website so you can see those. And also over in the chat function, Katie has put your link to your evaluation so that you can get your certificate for completion after this. And we appreciate all of you for being here. Thank you again, Sasha. And we look forward to
Great.
seeing you again soon.
Great. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.